reign of Louis XIV, 1643 to 1715, marks one of the most significant periods in the history of France, defined by the establishment of absolutism and the centralization of monarchical power. Known as the Sun King, Louis XIV epitomized the principles of absolute monarchy, consolidating authority under his rule and diminishing the influence of feudal lords and regional parliaments. His policies laid the foundation for a centralized state, characterized by an extensive bureaucracy, economic reforms, and a strong military. This essay explores the mechanisms through which Louis XIV centralized power, the role of Versailles in solidifying his authority, and the broader implications of his rule for France and Europe. The foundations of absolutism. Absolutism as a political doctrine asserts that the monarch holds supreme and unrestricted power over the state. This ideology gained traction in France due to political instability and religious conflicts, particularly the Wars of Religion, 1562 to 1598, which weakened noble families and created a power vacuum that the monarchy sought to fill. The Bourbon dynasty, under Henry IV and later Louis III, began laying the groundwork for absolutism. Cardinal Richelieu, chief minister to Louis XIII, played a critical role in suppressing noble uprisings, reducing the power of Huguenots, and strengthening royal authority. When Louis XIV ascended the throne in 1643, France was still recovering from the Fronde, 1648 to 1653, a series of civil wars led by nobles and parliaments against the monarchy. The rebellion highlighted the need for a strong central authority to prevent future insurrections. Influenced by Cardinal Mazarin, his chief minister, Louis XIV emerged determined to establish absolute control over the state and neutralize all potential threats to his power. Louis XIV's personal rule and the divine right of kings. Upon Mazarin's death in 1661, Louis XIV famously declared, "L'État c'est moi, I am the state," signaling his intent to rule without a chief minister. He embraced the doctrine of the divine right of kings, which held that monarchs derived their authority directly from God and were accountable only to him. This belief justified his centralized rule and discouraged challenges to his authority. Louis XIV eliminated powerful nobles from government by replacing them with appointed bureaucrats loyal to him. His administration functioned through councils of state, headed by ministers such as Jean-Baptiste Colbert, finance, and Michel Le Tellier, military. These ministers helped implement his vision of a centralized and efficient state. The role of Versailles in centralization. One of Louis XIV's most effective strategies for consolidating power was the construction of the Palace of Versailles. Completed in 1682, Versailles became the official residence of the king and the administrative center of government. By requiring nobles to reside at court, Louis XIV effectively neutralized their political influence. The elaborate court rituals and etiquette at Versailles distracted the aristocracy from engaging in political dissent, while reinforcing the image of the king as an all-powerful ruler. Versailles also symbolized the grandeur of Louis XIV's reign. The lavish palace, adorned with gold, mirrors, and extensive gardens, demonstrated the wealth and dominance of the French monarchy. The centralization of government at Versailles allowed Louis XIV to oversee all state affairs personally and ensured that provincial governors and intendant officials remained under his control. Economic policies and mercantilism. A centralized state required a strong economy to fund its bureaucracy and military. Louis XIV's finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, implemented mercantilist policies aimed at making France economically self-sufficient. These policies included encouraging domestic industries by granting subsidies and imposing tariffs on foreign goods, expanding colonial trade to increase revenue from overseas possessions, standardizing weights and measures to facilitate commerce, building infrastructure, including roads and canals, to improve internal trade. Colbert's reforms strengthened the French economy, making it one of the most powerful in Europe. However, the immense cost of Louis XIV's military campaigns and extravagant lifestyle placed a heavy financial burden on the state. Military expansion and wars. Louis XIV pursued an aggressive foreign policy aimed at expanding France's borders and asserting dominance in Europe. His military reforms, spearheaded by Michel Le Tellier and his son, François-Michel Le Tellier, Marquis de Louvois, created a modern, professional army. Key military developments included a standing army with standardized uniforms, training, and weaponry, the development of a sophisticated supply system to support prolonged campaigns, the use of fortifications designed by military engineer Sébastien Leprestre de Vauban to defend French territory. Louis XIV's wars, including the War of Devolutions, 1667 to 1668, the Franco-Dutch War, 1672-1678, and the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, expanded French influence but also drained the treasury. While his military successes initially bolstered his reputation, prolonged warfare and heavy taxation led to economic hardship and discontent among the populace. Religious policies and the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. Religious unity was a key component of Louis XIV's vision for an absolute monarchy. In 1685, he revoked the Edict of Nantes, which had granted religious tolerance to Huguenots. The revocation led to widespread persecution of Protestants, forcing thousands to flee France. While this policy reinforced the king's authority and aligned with his belief in Catholic uniformity, it also weakened France's economy by driving out skilled artisans and merchants. The legacy of Louis XIV's absolutism. Louis XIV's reign left a lasting impact on France and Europe. His absolutist model influenced other monarchs, including Peter the Great of Russia and Frederick the Great of Prussia. However, his relentless centralization of power also sowed the seeds of future discontent. The financial strains caused by his wars and lavish spending led to fiscal crises, setting the stage for social unrest and the eventual French Revolution in 1789. Despite these challenges, Louis XIV's centralization of power transformed France into a dominant European power. His administrative, military, and economic reforms laid the foundation for modern statecraft. And his legacy as the Sun King remains a defining symbol of absolute monarchy. Louis XIV's reign exemplifies the height of absolutism in France. By centralizing power, controlling the nobility, strengthening the economy, and pursuing military expansion, he established a highly organized and influential state. However, his policies also exposed the limitations of absolute monarchy, as financial pressures and social inequalities became increasingly apparent. While his reign marked a golden age of French cultural and political dominance, it also foreshadowed the challenges that would eventually lead to the decline of absolutism and the rise of revolutionary movements in the 18th century.